Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with another PB&J card class. This is video number 3 in our Flowers and Frames video series, and we are going to use brushstroke stamps today to keep painting like a watercolor artist but using stamps. And so I'm really excited to be making this card with you today. First of all, here is a look at what I have prepped in advance. I keep all of these items in an envelope. I have our curvature die. I've kept the interior piece. That's what we will be stamping on. This everything is cut from Strathmore Bristol smooth paper. And then the stamps that we will be using on this card from Penny Black are the Pas de Deux. So that's a brushstroke stamp, so it's a solid silhouette style stamp, as well as Nature's Paintbrush. So to begin, I've grabbed that interior piece from that curvature die and I've put it into my MISTI stamp positioning tool, and I am inking up my stamp using water soluble inks. I'm using Distress inks, and I am patting that onto the stem and leaf portions of the stamp, and I'm using forest moss and peeled paint. I put peeled paint over everything and forest moss more towards the leaves and the bottom of the leaves. I'm going to lightly mist that with water and stamp that down. And beside me I have my paintbrush and a cup of water and just a little paper towel. I dip my paintbrush in the water, pat it dry on the paper towel, and I can come right in here and blend out that stamping. So the Strathmore Bristol smooth paper is your best friend when it comes to this technique. And by having the paintbrush handy, you don't have to mist anything perfectly. In fact, right there, I didn't even mist it all. I just re-inked with a little more peeled paint ink and stamped it again right on top of that area that was still a little bit wet, just to darken it up a little bit. Now I'm cleaned off my stamp and I'm moving on to the petal part of the flowers. And this I'm inking up with worn lipstick, and then towards the like what would be the center of the flower, I'm turning my ink pad on the side, so just using the corner of it to swipe on a little bit of barn door ink, and I'll even go in with some picked raspberry as I stamp that. And again, with that paintbrush handy, I can just lightly blend right over the top of that, smooth out any areas, any places where I didn't mist it perfectly. Now, if you didn't want to use the paintbrush at all, you'd really have to mist it quite a bit more, which is a lovely look, but I like to retain some of that detail from the stamp. So I find this is like a happy medium of just misting a little bit but not so much I lose detail. And then I can blend it and I can just keep restamping if I want to add more. It's also really handy if you want to layer up your color like I'm doing here. You can do so while that part of your stamping is still a little bit wet, and you can recapture some detail or even darken up the colors. And that is exactly what I'm doing here. Those little mini ink pads make that really easy. You can do this with water soluble markers too, like Tombow dual brush pens or Arteza Twine markers, but I do find using an ink pad does apply a more even layer of color onto the stamp. It's just a little bit faster. So I kind of reserve my markers for this technique for when I want to do smaller areas or places that are real close to something else that the ink pad won't fit very good. So now I've put some spiced marmalade onto the center of the flowers, and I'm going to blend that out a little bit. I didn't even mist that because it was just such a small area. While it's still wet, I'll darken it up with a little bit of rusty hinge. And all of the colors, all of the products, everything I'm using will be listed for you down in that YouTube description box. And I'll also list and link for you all of the Penny Black supplies that I am using in that YouTube description box. And I did decide here I wanted a little bit more darkness. I'm just being picky and having fun on the flower. But it is fun to kind of keep building up the color and getting more of that detail in. So look at that, just with stamping. It looks like a watercolor painting. It is just really, really fun to do. Now I'm going to pull up the Nature's Paintbrush, and I'm just going to stamp this down at the bottom. So I want it to be very, very light in the background. So I'm using Memento ink in the color of Pistachio, and I picked this ink just because I like the color. It's super light, and I could just stamp it a few times and darken it up to the level of darkness that I want. I made sure everything was dry, and I'm using that same Memento ink in the color of Pistachio and an ink blending tool and a foam pad, starting off of the edge and working my way on in a circular motion just to put a little bit of sponge inking down at the bottom. So now I am going to put this panel directly onto my card base. So just a little bit different than I did the other ones, just to show you another way you can put this onto your card. So this is just a panel, the standard size panel, 4¼ by 5½ inches. I like to work on a panel and then add it to a card base later. So I've put down that stamped piece using double-sided tape. And then I'm going to take this curvature die and add a little bit of liquid glue, and I will add that right over the top. And since I used the interior piece from this die cut, this is just going to fit perfectly right over the top of that. So in the first 2 videos in this video series, which I'll link for you down below, I added that to my card in a little different manner, and you can pick whatever works best for you. So here I have die cut that curvature die a couple of times, and I'm just going to glue them right on top of there for some extra dimension. So on a clean and simple card, I really like what that dimension adds to the card, and it really spotlights that frame in the white on white with a background. So all I did to finish off this card is I added a little die cut butterfly just for some fun and to pull in that sort of orange color from the center of the flowers. And the card is complete. So I hope you've enjoyed. These first 3 videos of our flowers and frames have had some brushstroke stamping, but be sure you're subscribed because I will be back very soon doing some 3D embossing with flowers and adding them to some frames. Thanks so much for all of your kind words and for the thumbs up and subscriptions, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.